Hola, it's Joe Partavila. Welcome back to another episode of Forbes Books Radio. And some people like me have one employable skill. But then there are folks like today's guest who has done a lot. He's an entrepreneur, investor, corporate coach, and author. His name is Mike Shapiro. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good. How are you, Joe?
I'm fantastic, Mike. Thanks a lot. I was just joking about all the things you've done. You've lived a very nomadic existence. You grew up in the Northeast. You went to college in Arizona. You worked for a talent agency in New York. You did stock trading in Wall Street and in Chicago. But then your life really got interesting when you and your beautiful wife moved west. Tell me about it.
We moved to Arizona. I am trading off the floor. We bought a failing retail company. My wife wanted to go into fashion. And I'm making investments along the way. So I'm a trader and effectively what they call day trading off the floor and helping her with her fashion business and making other investments in other ground businesses in Arizona. So she had to travel to California every 6 weeks because she had to go to market other than going to New York and Europe. She had to go to market to fill the stores up. And it grew to be a large organization, her stores. Our accountant says, guys, you guys should go buy something. This is ridiculous. Look at your expenses. I'm like, yeah, you're really right. So we started looking in where it was something we could commute to, and it's hot in Arizona. So we ended up buying a second home in Newport Beach because it was an area that we could easily get to or she could easily commute to Los Angeles. Fast forward 3 years. And we're closing the house up to go back to Arizona. And she walked out of the shower, not to be graphic. And there was a bump on her breast. And it looked to me like a spider bite. She got out of the shower and she asked me what it was. And I'm like, I didn't say, oh my God, you've got cancer. I mean, you don't see cancer. And to me, I'm like, you got a spider bite. Don't worry about it. So we went back to Arizona. For whatever reason, she furthered her look and it ended up being cancer. And that changes your life. She was 39 years old to be diagnosed with cancer. It's not easy. And it was bad. So it was breast cancer. Started making appointments to every conceivable oncologist, surgeons, I'm just all over Arizona. We're meeting with doctors. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And everyone was saying the same thing. Cut it out. So weirdly enough, I make a phone call to our next door neighbor in Newport Beach, who was an oncologist. And he starts telling us, what he would do. And it was like a completely different medical outlook. When you're in a crisis of medicine, you just kind of know when it's the right decision. It's like a weird sort of this is the guy. I can't describe it. You just feel right. And I said, he's our next door neighbor. And I said to him at the end of this, I said, this is a big ask, but would you be our doctor? I mean, no one had explained cancer like this before, but he saved her life. She had a double mastectomy, chemo, radiation. And obviously this is from 2002. And so we're almost going on 20 years, knock wood.
Wow. I mean, that's just an amazing story. So how did that change you as a person and subsequently as a business person?
Well, it changes everything. The expression mindfulness comes to mind where you're living every day and the sweetness of your life and what's important and how it's important. In our situation, we became much closer. But my wife says things that are funny. I mean, she won't say that she liked having cancer. That's absurd. But she says that in a lot of ways, it was the most peaceful time in her life because it was the clarity of her existence was, and from myself as well, even though I was scared out of my mind of potentially losing my spouse. It was clear. We lived every day. We fought this. This was our mission. There was nothing else. It didn't matter. And of course, we were blessed with the financial resources to be able to afford the best care. And we were blessed with the financial resources. So I'm not making light of, there were things that we were extremely lucky that we didn't have to work. We could just focus on her cancer.
Wow. So after she recovered, that's when the two of you decided to permanently set up shop in Orange County, California, right?
Yes. So we left everything. We literally divested ourselves of all businesses that we had in Arizona and we retired. We were like, life's too short. We've been given a gift. We don't need any more money. We're not doing anything. I think that was a good decision to do that in some ways, but for me, it was a disaster. I am not a person who can be still. I mean, I guess I was blessed to be able to do that, but I was not understanding who I was, and that my being active or creating things or helping others or working.
How old were you at the time when this happened, when you decided to retire?
So I was young, was it 42, 43?
Wow, Mike, you're an incredibly blessed guy. You're retired in your early 40s, but I take it that you were missing something, right?
Well, yeah, I was miserable. So like, I was happy, but I think that like I was filling my life with material items. It was not what I wanted. Like buying cars and boats, and it was just it was almost like there's something missing. Well, this will make me happy. Oh, this will make me. It was just not satisfying. So I started a venture capital firm with a friend of mine called Versal, and we were looking for investment so I could get busy again and do something creative. I mean, we must have been the worst venture capitalists in history. I mean, it was like Larry David running around trying to make investments.
All right, so you end up being the worst VC on the planet. So what was the next step? What was the next job you took on?
So basically, I had a friend in Arizona who needed money for opening up a real estate company in Newport Beach. So Arizona, and this is in '07, as we know, was sort of ground central in Nevada as the disaster that occurred in '08 in real estate. So he saw the writing on the wall, and there was also seasonality in Arizona, and he wanted a real estate company in Newport Beach, and what I invested in. I subsequently spoke with my real estate agent at the time that we had bought a home from and asked her about real estate here. And now, mind you, I have some experience because my wife was a highly successful real estate agent. So it's not like I was blind in the business, but I wasn't familiar with it. So I met with the people that were running this company that was essentially going effectively bankrupt, which was called Home Real Estate Group. And they asked me to make an investment. And I remember, meeting the team, and I liked the team, I liked the people. And, it's ultimately, I think successful businesses are built on teams. And it was a relatively minor investment with some guarantees of a loan for all intents and purposes. Now, mind you, I'm a beginning venture capital guy. I don't really know what I'm doing. But remember, I don't have that much to do right now. I'm trading in the morning, and I'm really, I'm eager to do something. It was an interesting platform because once again, being a trader, I was, had recapitalized this in March of '08. Now, mind you, the bottom of the real estate game and the economy was September '08. So I almost picked the bottom, and not that I knew when Lehman failed. So I literally entered the real estate business at the worst possible time. I had friends, and everyone's like, "What are you, nuts?"
But essentially, Mike, you were buying low, right? Which is the old Wall Street adage, buy low, sell high.
Yes. And I didn't know that I had skill sets in sales. I guess I did, but I didn't know. And I didn't know I had skill sets in recruiting. And so I just showed up every day at this real estate company. And I saw opportunities that no one else saw. And to remind you, I have capital. Everyone is, the capital situation is a disaster in '08. I have capital to invest. And I see like, wow, this real estate business is interesting. It's a consignment business. And you know what's interesting to me? I noticed something was interesting in Newport Beach, specifically, is that people were reading the real estate ads and making decisions on how wealthy they were because housing was so expensive in the trade area that the house represented a source of equity or a source of their wealth, much more so than other trade areas like Chicago, which is more shelter oriented. So I noticed like, well, why don't I replicate, rather than look more like Coldwell Banker, why don't I look more like a Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch? Why don't I think of my agents as underwriters? So that's what I did. I looked and tried and marketed more like a brokerage, aiming as a financial side. Like we're underwriters and we're representing the most important and largest asset probably somebody has in their portfolio. And that's what I marketed, and that's what I did. And I capitalized it, and then we grew from effectively bankruptcy to almost $3 billion in sales. And I think I was the fourth largest Sotheby's in the world when I sold it, and I effectively sold it and made it into the second largest Sotheby's in the world.
That's amazing, Mike. Can you say how much you sold it for, or is that private?
No, I can't say that, but I got an extremely high X factor, like 10x.
Wow.
At the time, companies were selling for 3 or 4x. So yes, I can't really tell you that. I'm not at liberty on disclosure on that, but it was significant, and it was an amazing ride.
It sure sounds like it. What a great story. So after that big sale, you decided to give venture capitalism another crack, and you co-founded a company called Plunk, which is a real estate fintech startup. Tell us about that.
So I'm working with one of the founders of Google, if you can imagine, which is an extraordinary experience. And so I'm doing again what I did before, growing, and it's exciting, and being creative and using all of the skill sets that I learned along the ride.
What was Mike Shapiro, venture capitalist 2.0 different from venture capitalist 1.0? What did you learn that first time around that's helping you succeed this time around?
I'm looking at businesses differently as being an operator in a large scaled business, and there's a lot of similarities to other businesses. I remember I was a trader before, so I had to monitor from an outside perspective, what does equity performance mean versus internal performance, and what are the skill sets necessary in teamwork, and what are the skill sets of the leader and people under it. So I had, the experience now, what does scale mean, and who do you work with? They always say that youth is wasted on the young. So I think that this long time of all of these experiences has sort of generated my ability to function. And I spoke at USC recently in the entrepreneur program, their master's program. And most of the people are mostly interested in pivoting. And so some of the book is about how do you go from this to this to this to this, and how do you do that? Because people are always fascinated with that. If you're not happy in something, how do you do something else? Or how do you sell your business? And what do you do? And how do you define yourself?
What do you say to the entrepreneur out there who, like you, decided to start up a business or take over a business in the middle of the recession? What did you learn then that you think is applicable now to young entrepreneurs?
Well, I think, I coach as it stands right now a lot of people, and a lot of people have come to me during this period of time. What do I do because of this highly disruptive situation? I'm writing a blog as right now I'll give myself a plug under MikeSShapiro.com, and I talk about what's happening within the stock market, the real estate market, and valuations, and how my viewpoints on what should you do. And I think what happens is that this is something that I used to say on the floor. It always comes back, but it always comes back differently. So what people do is they run to one side or the other side of a seesaw. If you're resilient and adaptive, you will survive anything. Obviously, if you're, as long as you're in the game, as long as you're healthy. Well, people don't do that. Is they just go back. What happens in this kind of environment is that people go to what has worked before, but that's not what you should do. Remember, you always get paid for your creativity. You always get paid for your analysis. So what I've seen people is like, let's say you're a waiter or you're a fitness instructor or whatever. Like, I can't do this. So you need to pivot. What do you do as a fitness instructor? Well, I need to move everything online. What do I do as a waiter? Well, you obviously, hospitality isn't coming back the same way. You need to re-educate yourself. What else are you interested in? And so, like, what do? You don't stand there. What you don't do is take, oh my God, it's over. What do I have to wait for it to come back? Well, it's going to come back. I'm not going to say that COVID has disrupted forever. I mean, we're a species that has to be together. You can't be as creative. But I'm also saying that all of the trend lines that have occurred before COVID occurred are just being amplified. When I started with Plunk in Seattle, which is extraordinarily what we're doing in pernicious behavior in real estate valuation. In other words, if you say I want to put a new kitchen in, what is your house worth versus something like Zillow, which says what your house is worth today. And so what do I say to people? Look around you, read the tape. What can you do? I say to people, what are you great at? And then how can you give that creativity to the world? What platform can you use during COVID? So don't sit still. And that's the sad thing. People don't know how to fail. Failure should be enjoyed and rejoiced. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to utilize that? How are you going to get yourself out of this situation? There's always a way. And yes, people, all these naysayers, no one's going back to the office and no one's ever going to eat out. I mean, that's absurd, okay? Because they will, but they will do it differently. And of course, people will travel again, but people will travel differently. So what do you do as an airline? Well, you better make sure that there's got to be spatial distance. You got to figure a way out as an airline. What would I say to them? Well, don't make such small bathrooms. You need to charge more for your fares. You shouldn't be the bus. The U.S. should invest in infrastructure so there are high-speed trains, okay, in areas that shouldn't be using aircraft. I don't want to get into this podcast of what should you do, but there's obvious things that government should do, and there are obviously things that private enterprise should do to adjust to the new norm. Because what are we going to say to ourselves right now? Once we're through the pandemic, this is the only one. Do you not think that psyche is a lasting mark? It's just like if you have cancer, do you not think that impacts and changes you for the rest of your life? Is this the last? I hope in for the next 100 years or whatever, that this doesn't happen again. I mean, it's not like saying, but it could happen in 10 years. So this adjustment, for example, which we've been warned about, is it not interesting to all of you and all readers or listeners? Is it not interesting that people were speaking about this? Probably I can look back 40 years that people were talking about this, and suddenly it hits and we're like, what? Really, we were pre-warned. Most things that happen, and this you learn as a trader, it's the things that you don't know that hurt you, and it's things that you do know that never do. It's like the same thing that Waze works on a detour. If you know there's an accident in front of you, what are you going to just wait in line, or are you going to move around it? So the real question is how do you always have contingency plans to move around the things that surprise you?
Well, Mike, I appreciate your words of wisdom, and thank you for sharing the story about your wife and your professional life. And I have a feeling that Plunk isn't your last venture. I bet you got a few bullets left in that holster, don't you?
As I say, your mouth to God's ears, and I hope that I make a lasting impact and help others is really what ultimately I love to do.
That's pretty awesome. His name is Mike Shapiro. He's currently the managing director of Plunk, and to find out more about him, go to MikeSShapiro.com. Mike, thanks again for connecting, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Joe.
And that wraps up another edition of Forbes Books Radio, available for you to listen and subscribe to on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please, don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.